(267-495-4866) is my phone number, or DougKarnsProgram@gmail.com. Make sure you email me at any point during the show. I'll definitely get back to you as soon as I can. It is Doug Karns on the Doug Karns Program here on All Noise Radio, and we're talking about the Wall Street protest, of course. And really, honestly, I never felt so alone in this whole area that people my age just don't get it. They really don't get it. They don't understand what they're doing to our country. Because it's one thing to protest. You have the right to protest. But what are you protesting for? I mean, there's some people that don't know why they're down there. They just wanted to be a part of it. And they came out with a statement down in, what was it, Occupy Sacramento. They said, listen, we're not really sure why we're here, but listen, we're getting a committee together tonight to figure out what our message is, and then we'll come back to you tomorrow. And they've been there for days already. So why did they go there in the first place? I mean, that's like me going to Best Buy and be like, why did I come here? Why? I have no idea why I came here. I just wanted to be here. So maybe if I can get a consensus with myself and figure out why I'm here, I'll just stay here until I figure out what it is. And then I'll get back to you in the morning. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Shouldn't you know why you went somewhere? If you just showed up to show up, are you just being a useful idiot? Are you just going to go? And then you got to ask yourself, who are you lining up with? When you start seeing signs like this sign was in New York. Big picture says, queer kids, why kill yourselves when you can kill your parents? Now, anybody listening to me, do you agree with that sign? Wouldn't you question him and tell him to leave if that's not what you represent? Because I can tell you there's numerous times, which I'll have to pull up the video in the next break because I don't have time to do it right now because I'm only one person here on the show. But there was a time when during the Tea Party rallies where a guy infiltrated and said he was a racist, and he wore a KKK shirt, and he kept saying that I'm just a racist Tea Party, I'm a racist Tea Partier. And everybody was asking him to leave. They said, listen, you do not represent us. And they were politely asking him to leave. But he said no, because he wanted to be there to smear the Tea Party name. And you see on this video, I'll have to play it the next segment. But you see in this video that they are asking him to leave. Do you see anybody in these protests asking people with signs like this to leave? Because I believe they like to call themselves peaceful. Then they have protesters giving interviews like this, and I quote, he said, "They're devouring us. Now it's time for us to start devouring them back. I'm advocating cannibalism. We all have to cut them up and have a little ritual we all call communion." Now, I'm sorry, that sounds like violence to me. Does anybody remember when Nancy Pelosi and a bunch of other people, the media, called the Tea Partiers violent? Where do you see the quotes that the Tea Partiers said about this? I challenge you to... I said this a couple weeks ago. I challenge you to find these and send them to me, and I'll read them on the air, because I don't think there are any of them out there. But and then you see this picture of somebody carrying a head of the CEO of Goldman Sachs on a pike, like it's a French Revolution back in the 1700s. I mean, it's literally a picture, a bloody picture of the CEO's head on a pike. Now, they ridiculed Sarah Palin all last year for being violent, for using the words crosshairs on her website to target political districts that she believes that the GOP should win. Not inciting any kind of violence with those crosshair remarks, actually just talking about it in politics, but she was ridiculed, and she was forced to take them down because everybody just started sending her hate mail because of it. But then you have things like this, and the media says nothing. Don't you see the bias? It's a complete bias in the media, and you're not getting the truth from them. And like I said, Iran supports these rallies. If I was coming out and saying something and Iran supported me, I would totally question what I'm doing. Unless that's what you want. And that's what these people want. They want the statism that Iran rules under. They have the end say in everything. So just ask yourself a intellectual question right now. How did Hitler get in power? Just ask yourself that right now. How did he get in power? I can tell you how, and it pretty much mimics everything that's going on right now. See, in Germany, after the Weimar Republic fell, people were hungry, poor, they were homeless, and all they wanted was a direction. And you know who came along? The government. The government said, hey, we'll take care of you. And specifically, Hitler did. And he was elected. And then each day, he took a little more power, a little more power, a little more power, until he was a dictator. And I'm sure you heard this line before, but first they came for the Jew, I said nothing. And then they came for me. See, you can let them go after the rich all you want, but eventually they're going to come after you. See, if you want everybody to be on a level playing field, you need the government to be in total control. Because if you don't have the government in total control, then somebody's going to start speeding ahead again. So to keep everybody on a level playing field where nobody makes more money than the other person, the government needs to control everything and everyone. Now, I'm sure a lot of protesters would say, well, Hitler would never happen here. You know, we're not that hateful, you know, whatever. But either were the Germans. Even though German, the language itself, sounds evil, they're not evil. They just wanted help. And what do you think is happening now? Most of these young college students think they need help, and they're going to turn to the government. See, what you don't realize is that our founders saw it perfectly. They saw that God was the only one that gave us the right of freedom. He's the only one that gives us rights. He passes it down to us, and as a people, we give certain rights, very limited certain rights, to the government to govern us. But once you start giving away those rights to the government to let them do whatever they want, that's when bad things happen. Ask the people who were under Stalin or General Mao. Millions were killed because the government controlled everything. I mean, look at China right now. Everybody goes, "Oh, it's state capitalism. It's great because, you know, the government can step in whenever they want, and if not, you know, you can do your own business." Well, that's fine. Say I start my own business, work really hard, make it, you know, successful. All of a sudden, the government comes in, "Hey, you're being too successful here. We're going to have to take this away from you." And everything I've earned, worked hard for years, is gone. They have the right to do that. See, here in this country, as of right now, the government does not have the right to do that. If they see they could use your business for something else, they can take it right away from you, and you have no say in it. And this is why we have a republic. And again, if you ever hear the chants down there, you know, what does democracy look like? This is what democracy looks like. We are not a democracy. And it bothers me that George W. Bush, Obama, Clinton, Reagan, the other Bush, all of them, they called this democracy. We are a democratic republic. We vote leaders in to lead us. It's not mob rule. Mob rule loses every single time. And our founders knew this. Because in this video I'm going to play for you soon, you can see how mob rule can take over every individual and never let an individual speak his or her mind as an individual. And our founders knew that mob rule never, I mean, they tried it in Europe many times, and it just doesn't work. And that's why our Constitution is so placed, if you look at a scale, at 100% tyranny, which means the government controls everything, and 0% anarchy, our Constitution is a quarter of a way away from anarchy. It's nowhere near tyranny. But over the last 200 years, we've been pushing it towards tyranny. And we fought to get away from a big government that pretty much controlled us with taxes and no representation. And this is what you're going to be getting soon. So I want you to ask yourself, and ask anybody you know who supports these protests, what happens after the system collapses? What next? Because these people want capitalism to be gone. So what other system is there to replace it with? It's basically either anarchy, where there is no system, or tyranny, which is communism, Marxism, statism, whatever you want to call it. And if you don't think a murdering dictator can happen here in America, if you're saying that will never happen here, it will happen here. It certainly will. Because Germany didn't think Hitler would ever come to do what he did. And he said with his own words how the Jew was a problem. He blamed the Jewish people for hoarding all the wealth. What does that sound like today? That sounds just like Bank of America, Goldman Sachs. And first of all, you're blaming all these rich people? How about Kanye West, who has millions of dollars, who was down there wearing gold chains and protesting with you? Do you want his money too? And these banks serve on the Federal Reserve, which is created by Woodrow Wilson and the government. If you want to be protesting something, go protest the government, the Federal Reserve, which is the most unconstitutional charter ever created. And Woodrow Wilson knew this. It's basically ran by private bankers. So we pay, just to give you a little glimpse in the Federal Reserve, because I know a lot of people don't know anything about it, except for it says, it prints our money. The Federal Reserve is filled with chairmen that are from Bank of America or all these other banks, and there's no documentation of who it is, because in the charter it's allowed to be that way. So we can't even see which bankers are in there controlling the Federal Reserve. Now, do you think that's constitutional, where private corporations are in the government? I mean, that in the show Jericho that my girlfriend Maureen and I have been watching, that is exact scenario that a private company, once the country fell from these nuclear attacks, a private company was in the government, conspired against the government, and began building their own federal government as a private company. And if you don't think that can ever happen here with the Federal Reserve, I mean, we haven't had capitalism in this country in the last 100 years because the Federal Reserve has private companies in it controlling our money system. And we don't even elect anybody in the Federal Reserve. So, and we give them our tax money to run it and to print what. And by the way, our inflation rate is now at almost 10% a year over year, which means for every year that goes by, the Federal Reserve is deflating your dollar by 10 cents. So each year it's going down 10 cents, then 20 cents, then 30 cents until we have massive inflation where everybody's going to be poor and not have a job on the street. So if you want to protest anybody, don't worry about Wall Street. You need to protest the government. And that's the whole message of the Tea Parties, is that we want a small government and transfer the power back down to the communities where we can handle our own Social Security, our own social programs in our own tiny communities. If we lower taxes in the federal government and then raise them in our local communities, we can support ourselves. All right, we'll be right back after this.